Dear students, today's lesson is on memory, and the objectives under memory are the meaning and significance of memory, in which we would be discussing about the 3 stages of memory and types of memory. Under that, primary and secondary, motivated and trace change, and one of the most important topics, information processing model of memory. Under that, sensory memory, short term memory, long term memory will be discussed. Well, what is the purpose of this module, memory? Memory is highly essential for our lives. Memory is the primary process to remember the past, operate in the future and think about the future as well. So, it is quite a complex process which has a well defined place in the brain, and it involves factors like learning, retention, recall and recognition, as they are very well explained in this module. Well, the most primary now is the definition and meaning of the memory. Well, memory is an active and dynamic operating system that receives and accepts information, data from the senses and places that data or information into a usable form and organizes it as it stores away and then retrieves the information from the storage, and this is adapted from Baddeley. Well, according to Reburn, the definition for memory is the power that we have to store our experiences and to bring them into the field of consciousness something after the experiences have occurred. According to Reburn, memory is defined as the power that we have to store our experiences and to bring them back into the field of consciousness sometime after the experiences have occurred. There are 3 stages, 3 important processes of a memory, which are termed as number 1 coding, storage and retrieval. Now, let us discuss these 3 processes in detail. First process is encoding. It is the first process of memory system to get the sensory information, for example, like sight, sound, touch, etc., into a form that the brain can use. Encoding is the set of mental operations that people perform on sensory information to convert or transform that information into a form that is disposable in the brain storage system. For example, when there is a visual image on the retina, the optic nerve or the cranial nerve transfer the information from the retina into the specific vision centers of the brain, which makes it possible for the brain to interpret that visual image. Next process is storage. That is the next step in memory, and it is to hold on to the information for some period of time in a process that is called as storage. The period of time actually be of different lengths depending on the system of memory being used. For example, in one system of memory, people hold on to information just long enough to work with it, about say 20 seconds or so. In another system of memory, people hold on to information more or less permanently. And the third stage is retrieval, the final process of memory system, to recover the stored information at a later time. And it could be a problem stage for few when getting the information they have out of storage, that is retrieval. Retrieval becomes difficult as well. Well, these 3 stages of memory do not operate the same way in all the situations. Memory processes differ between situations that requires us to store material for less than a second, say second for a matter of second, or for longer intervals, ranging from minutes to years as well. Now, the second topic is types of memory. Now, memory or storage of learning has a neural and chemical basis. Now, scientists working in the field of chemistry have proposed that ribonucleic acid, RNA, one of the potential chemical agents that is responsible for memory. Similarly, there are psychological processes too which can provide the basis for memory. The processes described here are primary, secondary memory and motivated memory, trace change and so on. What are these primary and secondary memories are? The dichotomy of primary and secondary memory is based on psychological processing. The concept of primary or secondary memory was formulated by William James. According to him, these two dichotomized storage systems depend on the nature of consciousness. Information in primary memory was considered to be that matter which is currently in consciousness and that which belongs to the psychological present. Secondary memory items are said to be absent from consciousness at a given point of time and belong to the psychological past. So, this description however was found to be inadequate because it says little about the processing of information in these two systems. Now, about motivated memory and trace change. What is motivated memory? According to the theory of psychoanalysis, individual will remember what he wants to remember and forget what he does not want to remember. So, the key concept guiding this motivated memory theory according to Freud is repression, that is the unconscious blocking of information which have painful or anxiety provoking associations. Such associations would manifest themselves through forgetting, a slip of tongue or pen in which the speaker or the writer makes an error, which is said to reflect his underlying feelings rather than his intended meaning. According to Freud, the experiences of historical amnesia, in which a person in emotional stress is completely unable to recall anything about his life. Well, what is trace change? Trace change is a concept supported by German school of Gestalt psychology, which is during 20th century. So, their interest in the study of memory is directed towards exploring two specific areas, memory trace and change of trace due to organization of memory. They predicted that there can be no decay or destruction of the memory trace under normal conditions, no injuries or infections of the brain, etc. So, Gestalt psychologists, they claim that when we see a triangle or a hexagon with gaps, the memory trace would spontaneously tend more and more towards perfect triangle and hexagon, leading to a good gestalt or good whole. So, the principles identified are leveling, simplifying, sharpening and elaborating. Now, let us discuss about the models of memory. Memory, a type of information processing in the capacity to store, encode and retrieve information. When the storage process occurs, where does the information go? Researchers and experts have proposed several different ways of looking at memory. The model that many researchers feel is the most comprehensive and influential is the information processing model, IP model. This approach focuses on the way information is handled or processed through three different systems. Encoding. While many aspects of memory information may follow a series of steps or stages, there are those who see memory as a simultaneous process which the creation and storage of memories taking place across a series of mental networks like stretched across the brain. This model is called as parallel distributed processing, PDP model. So, this is derived from the work in the development of artificial intelligence. So, other researchers have proposed that a duration depends on the depth, that is the effort made to understand the meaning, to which the information is processed or encoded. This is called as levels of processing model. The PDP model is less about the mechanics of memory, and though IP model takes the central stage, it is important to remember the concepts of the levels at which information is processed and the way that those processes may take place. Next important model is the information processing model, in which there are 3 memory systems which we would be discussing now. Now, information processing theory, it looks at how memory and other thought processes work, and it bases its model for human thought on the way that a computer functions. And this is what Massaro and Cowan have discussed. Data are encoded in a manner that the computer can understand and use. The computer stores that information on a disk, hard drive or memory stick. Then the data are retrieved out of storage as needed. Computer memory is any physical device capable of storing information temporarily, like RAM, random access memory, or permanently like ROM, read only memory. Now, the information processing model, which has 3 memory systems. Now, information processing theory looks at how memory and other thought processes work, bases its model for human thought on the way that computer functions. Information processing theories first proposed that there are 3 stages of memory systems. First one is sensory memory, next short term memory and long term memory. Now, what is sensory memory? Sensory memory is the first stage of memory, and it is the point at which information enters the nervous system through the sensory systems like eyes, ears, nose and so on. Sensory memory is like a door onto the world. Information is encoded into sensory memory as neural message in the system. It can be said that people have a memory for that information that can be accessed if needed. There are 2 kinds of sensory memory that have been studied extensively. They are iconic, that is visual, and echoic, that is auditory sensory memories. Now, iconic sensory memory, that is visual sensory memory, which is called as iconic, which lasts for a fraction of second. Icon, in fact, it is Greek word for image. Entire information is available for a brief period of time after about second, and then it completely gets faded out of sensory memory in that brief time. In real life, and then it will be pushed out very quickly by new information, a process called masking. Researchers found that after around only a quarter of second, old information is replaced by new information. Though it is rare, some people do have the ability to access a visual sensory memory over a long period of time, termed as photographic memory. Some people, especially children, have eidetic imagery or the ability to access a visual sensory memory. Over a long period of time, children without understanding, remembering what is written in the form of words or images on the pages is useless, which may diminish by adolescence or young adulthood. Overall, iconic memory helps the visual system to view surroundings as continuous and stable in spite of these saccadic or simultaneous and quick eyes movements. It also allows enough time to brainstem to decide if the information is important enough to be brought into consciousness. Now, about echoic memory. Echoic memory is a brief memory of something a person has heard in terms of echoic memory. Sometimes a person does not really process the statement heard from the other person, but heard it. Brain does not interpret it immediately, but takes several seconds to realize that. Well, it is very useful when a person wants to have meaningful conversation with others and allows people to hold on to incoming auditory information long enough for the lower brain centers to determine whether or not processing by higher brain centers is needed. For example, it is echoic memory which allows a musician to tune a musical instrument. Now, about short-term memory. If incoming information sensory message is important enough to enter consciousness, that message will move from sensory memory to the next stage of memory, that is called as short-term memory, STM. Unlike sensory memory, short memories are held up to 30 seconds or more. First one is selective attention, that is selective information, how information enters into STM. Selective information is the ability to focus on only one stimulus from among all sensory input. Broadbent studied this particular concept. It states that through selective attention that information enters out STM system. So, when the information passes through the selective attention filter into short-term memory, STM tends to be encoded primarily in auditory form, that is sound form, or people tend to talk inside their own heads, with few images certainly stored in STM in a kind of visual sketch pad, right. Auditory storage accounts for much of short-term encoding. So, research in which participants were asked to recall numbers and letters showed that errors were nearly always made with numbers or letter that sounded like the target, but not with those that looked like the target word or number. Now, what is working memory? Working memory is thought of as an active system that processes the information present in short-term memory. Some memory theories use the term working memory as another way of referring to short-term memory. Here, short-term memory can be referred to as simple storage of working memory as relating to storage and manipulation of information. Working memory is thought to consist of three interrelated systems: a central executive that controls and coordinates other two information systems, that is the visual and auditory. In a sense, short-term memory can be seen as being a part of the working memory system. So, interference in STM can also happen if the amount of information to be held in STM exceeds its capacity. So, information already there in STM may be pushed out to make room for the new information. This is why it might be possible to remember the first few names of people one meets at a party, but as more names are added, they displace the older names. A better way to remember a person's name is to associate the name with something about the person's appearance, a process that may help move the name from short-term memory into more permanent storage. This more permanent storage is long-term memory. Now, what is long-term memory? This is the third stage of memory. So, long-term memory is the system into which all the information is placed to be kept more or less permanently. In terms of capacity, long-term memory seems to be unlimited for all practical purposes. This has been proven by 𝗪𝘅 and Bernard-Grayson. Duration, as for duration, there is a relatively permanent physical change in the brain itself when a memory is formed. That means that many of the memories people have stored away for a long time, even since childhood, may still be there. That does not mean that people can always retrieve those memories. An elaborative rehearsal here is a way of transferring information from short-term memory into long-term memory by making that information meaningful in some way. The easiest way to do so is to connect new information with something that is already well known. to remember a French word maison, which means house, and to memorize this word maison using maintenance rehearsal. Maison sounds like mason, which means who builds houses. So, that makes the meaning of the word tie in with something the person already knows and helps to remembering the French term maison with mason, who builds the house. Three types of long term memories, namely episodic memory, which deals with the individual's personal experiences. Semantic memory refers to meaning including connotations and to organized sets of knowledge one has acquired and stored. And the third one is procedural memory. It refers to the way we remember how things are done, or it deals with memories of actions like riding a bicycle, etc. So, in brief, today we have discussed about the definition and meaning of the memory, in which we have discussed three stages of memory and types of memory. Under that, primary and secondary, motivated and trace change, and one of the most important topics, information processing model of memory. Under that, sensory memory, short term memory, long term memory.